First off, I want to remind everyone, one of my goals with this podcast is that I just want to interview my friends. And so I've had so many friends over the last 10 years of sales that are like, yeah, I'm going to start a business someday. Well, here's your motivation. Just go and do it. So it's really awesome to have one of my former VPs of sales, Brandon Winter, back in college when I was trying to switch from door to door into tech. He was the one that gave me a chance as an SDR when I felt like I couldn't get an SDR job anywhere else. And it was like a really good opportunity. Stukent has provided lots of opportunities for college students at BYU, Idaho that are trying to break into the tech scene. So I owe him a ton. And just some more background, he was the second sales hire at Stukent, became VP sales, CRO, made it to the acquisition, and now is running his own companies. So super excited to have you here, Brandon, and just hear more about like what you got going on now.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, man. Maybe just to like give a little more insight, do you mind just giving a little background and everything for people listening?
Yeah, totally. So grew up in Fresno, California, met my wife, Meredith. We were going to school at BYU down in Provo, and we now live in Rexburg, Idaho with our 5 boys. These summer months are great, just lots of sports and camps and doing some kayaking and bridge jumping this summer. We'll spend a little bit of time digging in the trenches with the new subdivision we're doing and laying some pipe there, and then kind of capping it off with some road trips to see family. So excited to be here.
That's awesome. Yeah, Idaho's a special place. I feel like it's a little hidden gem up there. And your last name, I mean, I guess you're just like born for it, right? You love to live in the Arctic.
February, March timeframe is tough. We have some times where we contemplate what we're doing here, but yeah, the boys love it, and we acclimate. So it's been good.
Yeah. Well, I guess a fun place to start off would be just to like hear about what it was like building Stukent for 10 years, especially like as a bootstrapped company, right? I live in Utah. There's a lot of venture-backed companies up and going, California where you're from, that's like a really big thing as well. But you helped Stu as like his revenue leader build a company in a really small town that has not a lot of tech resources, and you guys built it without taking on a ton of funding. Like, what was that whole experience like?
Yeah, so I think maybe even going back just a little bit further. So Fresno, I've been gone 20 years, but I did kind of get a taste of Silicon Slopes back when I was going to school there. I did door-to-door sales for a few years. I worked for a few startups in Provo, one of which is still around. And then spent a handful of years in corporate America before coming back to the startup space. But since being at Stukent, so I joined back at the beginning of 2014, Stu, founder, and we had Trevor Erickson, who was the first hire for marketing, and Mark Krugenberg was the first for sales and had ed tech sales background. So I came in as employee number 4. We just had a couple of schools that were piloting our simulation for the first time. And they were fun early years. So didn't have a lot of money. What we did when I joined Stukent, because I think this might be helpful for those that are considering what I'm going to talk about next, which is land development, where quite a bit of capital is required. When I joined Stukent, I negotiated with Stu and said, hey, listen, like I'm interested in stock options. So we kind of went back and forth, and I traded 5 months worth of no pay for my stock options. And what we did instead was Mare and I just decided to dig into our savings and kind of scrape by those first 5 months and really hustle and go all in with Stukent in hopes that someday that sacrifice would pay off. So 8 years later, we had a private equity firm come in and buy up a portion of our stock options. And that was, off the back of not just me and our family, but hundreds of other folks that have come through and helped to build Stukent, you being one of them.
That's crazy. I didn't know that you sacrificed 5 months of pay. So were you like actually getting paid $0 for the first 5 months?
Correct. And in education sales, there's kind of those waves of commissions. So our first commission check, I joined at the beginning or middle of February of that year, and our first paycheck came in fall. So it was a little nerve-wracking, and it was more than just like keeping the lights on. It was like, we got to make this work.
That's a huge sacrifice. That's a big bet to make. What made you so confident that Stukent was worth taking that kind of risk?
Great question. So prior to joining, Stu and I knew each other. He reached out and knew that I was in Oregon at the time, living just outside of Corvallis, and he was coming to meet with that first pilot school, Oregon State University. And so he just said, "Hey, listen, this is what I'm doing. I'd love to kind of get your take on it, and maybe even make some calls and see if you can set some appointments." And the next day I had the day off. And so I just found Google and started Googling colleges from Portland down to Corvallis. That first day had 7 appointments set to meet with different professors in digital marketing or marketing, because most didn't have a digital marketing course at the time. And he and I went and sat in and talked with professors in that area. And I sat in the back of the class of the Oregon State University class where they had just finished up the simulation for the first time. And students were saying things like, "This is the best class I've ever taken. These are marketable skills. I want to be a digital marketer now." And I just kind of knew, like, okay, product market fit is there. Fairly easy to start booking those appointments. And I also had some family members that were early stage investors. So there was just a lot that was kind of going for us. And I also was kind of plateauing where I was at and felt like I needed to take a little bit more of a risk. And this was the opportunity that I felt like I could do it. And especially with the team that was starting before. So
That's cool. Did you guys have any kids at the time?
yes. So we had Gunnar, Nash, and Griffin. We had 3 boys. And Griffin was only a couple months old. So we were giving up like benefits, salary, all that stuff, just in the hopes that this would kind of pan out.
So it had to, like, that was one of those situations where it had to work.
Yeah, you kind of
you
put
had a lot
yourself
on
in
the
a
line.
position to make it work.
That's awesome. I've never heard that story from you, but it's a lot of it's timing. I think with startups, being able to be in the right place at the right time. It's not always like the person that's the most talented or the most skilled. I think a lot of it is just coming down to having the right people in your network and being able to execute on that opportunity when it comes, which obviously like you did, but you were able to find like a startup that was growing before like a lot of other people did, but then also you had to execute on it when you got there. Were there things, it sounds like that early time was like pretty important for the growth of Stukent. Were there things you feel like you learned at that time that have helped you with, like the businesses you're doing now?
Yeah, I think you alluded to it, like there's a definite element of luck in a lot of ways for the success that we've had. And I think surrounding yourself with the right people, being truly like bought in, and then just being willing to grind. Like that's kind of what it comes down to. I don't know that there was anything that we could do on our own, but like literally it took a team, it took an army to kind of make this happen. So yeah, there was a lot of early morning demos. I remember when we first started, 3 young kids in the house, and I was working from home at the time. And I ended up having to break away to my in-laws' house, and I had a little office set up in the room my wife grew up in. But like it was a lot of like 5 a.m. calls because there were people in India that I could talk to and start selling there. And then, a lot of East Coast schools early on. And then, the late nights, like whenever I could get a demo, I was taking a demo. And some people just get complacent or get comfortable. And that's happened to me too at times. And so you just kind of have to keep feeding yourself and looking for opportunities to grow. And I think a lot of it is who you surround yourself with.
Yeah, no, I love that. And I feel like I was at Stukent for a short time, but you guys did a great job at attracting high quality talent and being able to develop them and also help people go on and have other opportunities. Because there's a lot of people, yourself included, that were at Stukent for a few years and then they went on and did something really cool. And I think that that's a sign of a good group of people at a startup. I mean, you see it with like the PayPal Mafia, right? Which that's obviously like on a much grander scale, but like you have a group of people that are really talented that can build one thing and then they just go build other things because they have that high capacity in them. And so I guess for you though, I mean, you stuck it out like all the way through the acquisition. You were there for almost 10 years. What were some of like the hints or like the signs that like you'd rode this wave enough and that you wanted to try and do your own thing?
Yeah, so I was there 8 years. It was a long time, I guess, in the startup world, but it went by really fast. In terms of timing, like a few years in, it was pretty hard. Like for me, I remember like December timeframe, usually around Christmas break, you're back with family and you're thinking to yourself like, okay, this has been great, but like I really had this itch to do my own thing. Like probably a lot of your listeners do, where it's like, man, I feel like I can go do it on my own. I feel like I can do my own thing and I want that control and that freedom. But for whatever reason, like I'd go back to work, get right back into the swing of things, and you're kind of pulled back into this rhythm and system that was fulfilling and that was working. And so um, it was when the private equity firm came through, I had already started doing some land development. So kind of similar to when I picked up the phones before I joined Stukent, and started making calls and booking demos without any type of commission structure or anything. Stu didn't promise me anything. He came into town, we made some visits, he gave me some swag, and then he said, hey, listen, if you decide not to join us, just ship the jacket back to me, the t-shirt back to me. So a year prior to closing on the private equity deal, our friends, hey, listen, this is what we recently bought some land. I think it was about 12 to 14 lots. They built a little subdivision. They just sold their last lot, and then they decided they were going to do it again, but do it bigger. And so they approached us and said, hey, like we could do this on our own, but we really want to do this with someone we want to work with. And at the time, there were conversations that were beginning with private equity firms, and money could be coming at some point, but it might not pan out. Mary and I kind of looked at our bank account and the money we'd been saving for a long time, and just decided, kind of similar to Stukent, like 7, 8 years prior, it was like, this feels right. Let's go all in. And it was hard to kind of see that bank account deplete once again in hopes that this new venture would pan out. But so many stars aligned for us that allowed me to say, okay, I'm ready to take the leap and leave Stukent. So yeah.
Well, in what year did you buy your first batch of land?
So that would have been, we closed on our first property in February of 2021. So, and I left March of 22 from Stukent. Yeah, so we, just a couple months prior to that February closing, they approached us. We had a specific location in mind, a property that we wanted to buy that was adjacent to the subdivision they had just finished. So there's kind of a lot of momentum coming off of that. And then the owner decided he didn't want to sell. The timing wasn't right. And so we hopped online, looked at the GIS map, and started identifying properties that we felt like would be a good fit for the next subdivision. And we knew kind of a fair price. And so we just printed out these LOIs, like a letter of intent, and we went and knocked doors of like landowners, of farmers, and just approached them with like an LOI in hand saying, hey, here's who we are. This is what we want to do. Any interest?
That's super scrappy.
Yeah.
That's super.
Kind of going back to the door.
What's a GIS map?
Like a geographic. I'll have to look it up. I don't.
Is it something that people use in like land development just to like see where the city is going to develop different parts? Like, do you have to make sure that like certain parts of town are approved to get developed on? Like, is that something I don't know. I guess, how does that process work?
Yeah, geographic information system. So
okay.
Yeah, so we have each county like has their own. We in this region, there's one that you can hop on, and it will show you, the parcels of land, how many acres, the zoning, and who owns it. And in many cases, if it's not an LLC that owns it, you can see like individual property owners' addresses, and that's how we went and knocked doors. So yeah, we found our first property. This again, like the timing couldn't have been better. So we bought our land for 12,500 per acre. Like you can't find that now. You'd be hard pressed to find under 20K an acre in this area.
Holy,
Yeah, so it's a 65 acre parcel. We were able to kind of get scrappy with a lot of things on this project where we put 60 lots in the subdivision. So they're close to 1 acre lots. Our wives and our kids were out there in the trenches laying pipe for utilities. The guy that was doing our roads was pulling gravel from some pit that he was digging just down the road for somebody's pond. And so we were kind of able to pull in a lot of our material from that. So there's just a lot of things that we did that I think most land developers would not do. Just kind of rolling up our sleeves and getting after it. So
one thing I'm curious, I mean, you just said that you did a lot of things that other land developers wouldn't do. But I mean, I know that there's a lot of land developers in Southeast Idaho, and I know that those farms are just going up for sale everywhere, it seems like.
Mhm.
What separated you guys when you showed up? Like, why did they decide to sell to you and not some like larger company that was coming in?
So a few years ago, that wasn't the case in our area. Most owners were not even contemplating selling. And so those were kind of initial conversations that were being had. We walked into an opportunity where the owners of the property passed away and it was passed on to some heirs. And every you have like a handful of heirs trying to figure out what to do with land, and many don't live in the area anymore, it's less complicated to just sell and be done with it. And so, again, it was a timing situation. It was also an opportunity where we had saved money and were in a position to buy land. A lot of land deals probably would leverage a bank or investors. We had, McKay and Carly, ourselves, and then we had two family members that came in as silent partners, and they were debt deals. So one was a partial equity deal, but mostly debt deals. So we had a window of time where we would pay them back plus interest, and it was a good deal for them and a great deal for us putting in the work. So
Wow. And so timeline wise, you know that Stukent has talks of like being acquired, you're being approached about this real estate stuff. Was that, I mean, I imagine that's a lot to manage. How hard was it to manage like your full-time role as well as like doing that on the side?
yeah, so it's very project based. So what we were doing was primarily a lot of behind the scenes things. So we were working with a surveyor. We kind of back of the napkin, McKay designed an efficient layout for the subdivision. I took that on Canva and kind of built something out, and then we gave that to the surveyor who then built our plat map. The engineer we were working with, like he was doing a lot of the work. So you kind of outsource a lot of things. Our road guy was doing his thing. So the trench work that we were doing, those are nights and long weekends. I remember kind of one pivotal moment where it was like all hands on deck because the power company was coming in the next day and our trenches weren't done. And so right after I got off work, I drove straight over to the land. McKay and I worked from like 5 o'clock when we got off until about 7 a.m. the next morning when I had to go back and like go shower and go back into work. And that was just like one moment where it was kind of like, okay, we are all in and I don't want to pull an all-nighter again. So let's get our ducks in a row. But it was a juggling act a little bit, but I think, again, we were kind of fortunate to be in a position where we could outsource a lot of that work. And then lots were starting to, again, the timing of things. So we are kind of the option. And so we're getting quite a few locals, but mostly out-of-staters that are buying and contemplating moving to somewhere, more remote because they can work remote. And from the time that we closed on the land until we sold our last lot was just over a year. Like that doesn't happen, especially like a 60-lot subdivision. So it won't happen again, probably ever for us, but it worked out nicely.
That's kind of a crazy experience too, just I'm sure reflecting, because it's like you front a lot of this capital, you're working nights, and then like this could have gone either way though, because it could have been that the market dried up and then all your capital is sitting in these these lots for sale. But it
Yeah.
sounds like because you guys were able to put enough like cash down that even if it took longer, it wouldn't have been completely financially devastating. Is that like, did you guys
Yeah.
hedge the downside risk pretty well?
You got to go into land development like this, or probably most real estate deals, with just a long-term perspective. So,
Hmm.
I mean, the worst case scenarios we were drawing out were like, okay, if we had to sit on this land for a decade, would we be okay? And the answer was yes. So that's
Okay.
that's kind of what we went into it with. And then for us, it's always like the quickest way to break even. So we got to break even like a couple months in, and then it's like, okay, now you can rest easy. Selling, someone comes in for one lot and you're like, well, do you want the one next to you too? Do you want to be able to control the lot next to you? What if you want to expand? Do you want a family member or friend to come? Because we were selling lots for like 65 grand, which again, you can't find something like that for a 1 acre lot, probably where you're at.
Oh,
So
no.
yeah,
No, definitely not.
the final lots, like we were selling for 85K, but we started prices lower, and then we started to bump them up as demand was still there and supply became limited. And so it was just a matter of kind of the right pricing too, to kind of sell as many as we could, as quick as we could.
Yeah. Well, and so I know that you're working on another development. Um, and then I know that you also acquired another company. What's Can you help me understand like where that fit in?
Yeah. So after we sold out our first one, we took some chips off the table, but then rolled most of our money that we made right back into the next project. And so we bought 120 acres. And so it's kind of just like this really picturesque, super hard to find. Like there's nothing comparable in the area. And this one's still ongoing, so I don't know how many details I can share here. But again, we did a few things to get scrappy and get to break even as quickly as possible, which we're at break even and we haven't sold any lots yet. So we cut off a parcel, sold that to someone. There was an old farmhouse there. We did a lot split on 2 acres there, sold that off. We've got this subdivision going. We did sell one. I take that back. We did sell one lot so far, but the roads aren't in and the utilities aren't done yet. And then we're hanging on to 40 acres, the Francis family and us, just down by the river, that we're going to probably keep long term. So that one's in the works. We'll be doing a little more work. I was in the trenches yesterday with the crew. A couple weeks ago, it was snowing while we were there. So you just never know what you're going to get with Southeast Idaho weather. But so that's one project. And then the other one, we did another subdivision. We bought another 60-acre parcel. And that one is a little different. So we did seller finance on that one. We annexed that one into the city. So rather than being like a county project, it's a city project. You've got less wells and septics going into the ground. You're connected to the city utilities. So it's a good thing for the area. It's across the street from the Teton Lakes golf course, if you remember that back from when you were
Hmm.
here. So it's a really good area. All of our projects have been in Hibbard, which the locals there, I'm sure if they've been there a long time, they're not fans of ours. But it's a beautiful area. More people that deserve to live out there, I guess.
Yeah, it's so funny like talking to you about this because my wife and I have talked about moving back to Rexburg, Idaho, just to be close to the campus again because it's such a beautiful area. You're really close to the Tetons. Everyone at the school is so nice and stuff like that. But I don't know,
Yeah,
probably not in the cards for us. But I love the area down there, especially like now that it's growing. I bet it's also really hard to just know like what's going on in the community and like how's the market shifting. But the nice thing about being in a small town and having lived there so long, you kind of have an idea of like what things are going in where and stuff like that. Because you mentioned being by the golf course. Okay, a lot of people want to be there and stuff like that. Just being able to predict where are the best developments going to go in and how do you position yourself to buy those and be the one that's supplying the land.
yeah. I mean, it's a lot like sales. It's like the more reps you put in, the better your instincts become. And because we've relied a lot on our instincts for the success we found, and by no means are we. I mean, there's when you think about land developers, like land developers down in Utah, I'm sure they're playing in a very different game than we are. Like this is very small town stuff. But because we've gotten some reps now, we've had some success. we get presented with a lot of opportunities. So we see a lot of what's happening in the area. We spend a lot of time with planning and zoning, both at the county level, also city council and staff, understanding like what's happening in terms of growth.
No, I mean, I definitely like the approach that you have versus what's happening in Utah, because a lot of developers here, I imagine, are highly leveraged on debt, which you guys have been able to avoid or mitigate. It sounds like a lot similar to how
Yeah,
you did at Stukent, right? Like Stukent never took on a massive amount of funding and was able to just be really scrappy and grow that way, which long term is way better because especially right now, right? I mean, I was listening to a speaker at this tech conference I went to, and he said like there's so many founders that are really good at raising money, but they don't know how to sell. And so if you can learn how to sell and become profitable without having to take on funding, you're just in a much better position.
yeah. I mean, Stu did a really good job at Stukent of maintaining a large portion of ownership, and a lot of that came down to like more risk on his part and just being more scrappy early in the early days. And I think that's kind of our approach and mentality too. We're willing to put our own like skin in the game. And we've had a lot of people approach us about like being an investor or throwing some money in, and we're doing some partnership deals. And for us, like we just haven't felt the need to do that, and so we tried to bootstrap what we can.
I love that. Brandon, I want to hear about what you're doing with Fundraise Genius, because I feel like it ties in really well to what you did at Stukent. I know you've told me a little bit about it, but can you give me like the high level on what Fundraise Genius is?
Okay, yeah. So the land development deals have been great. They're like one hit big projects, but there's nothing reoccurring about it. And so I was on the hunt for the next small business that we could acquire. So my wife and I have an LLC we started a long time ago called Clarity Management, and that's kind of our umbrella company. So we've got some real estate LLCs, and we were looking for that something that could be that reoccurring stream of income for us, but also something that I felt like I knew the industry well enough and that I had some expertise to help it grow. So we were looking primarily in the ed tech space and happened upon a company called Fundraise Genius. It was built by two music educators back in 2018. And it's a fundraising platform for high school and middle school music programs. So bands, choirs, orchestras, they've got to raise money every year to keep the program growing. There's a lot of travel expenses involved, new instruments, clinicians coming in. There's just a lot of needs they have, and they don't get the necessary funding from the school districts or from the state. And so we're a big reason why they can go and create these cool experiences for kids that are they just want to enjoy music, right? So yeah, they've solved a problem by building this platform, but had no interest in scaling a business. And so it was kind of that perfect marriage where I was able to come in and buy it, and I'm running it solo right now. So
How did you source this deal?
yeah, so when I had identified ed tech, I started looking for several companies that were very distant from Stukent. I didn't want any conflict of interest there. And I just started telling a few people like, hey, I'm on the hunt for a small business. Here's kind of my price range. Here's like what I would be looking to bring to the business. If you hear of anything, please let me know. And one of my best friends he spends a lot of time on Biz Buy Sell, or did at the time. Biz Buy Sell is like the place where I feel like waste a lot of time if you're looking for a small
Yeah.
business to buy. It's just really hard to find a diamond in
Mm-hmm.
the rough. So he found this business, approached me about it, thought about partnering on it and buying it, and had we had one call together with the owners, and he jumped in with me and hopped on that first call. And as soon as we got off, I said, I'm ready to go. Like, this is the next opportunity. I want to go all in. We'll do a huge chunk of cash up front, and then we'll have a second payment a year later and own the business outright. And he had decided like, I've got enough things going. I'm doing well. Brandon, why don't you just run with this? And so, yeah, I took it on, and my hope is at some point here to bring in an operator that runs the day to day. And I go find the next business. The goal is 5 to 7 small businesses like this with an operator in each one that can successfully run it. And then I'm really focused on training, coaching, and mentoring those leaders.
How big was the company when you acquired it? And have you been able to scale it at all in like the last 6 to 12 months?
Yeah, so they were doing just over $1 million in fundraising in a 12-month window, ARR, and I've been able to grow it about 30%. I bought it last July, so we're still kind of early stage here.
Sorry,
go ahead.
Is that how much they've raised for other companies, or is that like how much they did in revenue?
So yeah, the way that it works is the way that it works is the gross amount raised was just over $1 million this past year, and the company has a 12% platform fee and then 3% credit card processing. So schools keep 85% of funds raised. That's their net. And so there's a dashboard that shows them exactly where they stand and how much they make. And we're trying to add as much value in addition to that as we can for kids, looking at some stuff for some scholarships and so just some ways to partner and help provide more value to these schools. But we should double this year. By the end of 2024, we'll double revenue, gross and net. So it's going well. I bought it the end of June, so June 30th of last year, and then so my final payment on the business is coming up at the end of June here, and then we'll own it outright. But it's been a fun journey so far.
That's cool. And so, how exactly do you guys help the school programs fundraise more? Is it just like you create a landing page for them, or like what do you actually do that's helping them raise more money?
Yeah. So one of the reasons why I bought it is because of how simple the business and business model is. Sometimes we just overcomplicate things. And if I can understand it, if I can't understand it like a one pager, I'm not that interested. So these guys did a phenomenal job building a platform that's very easy to understand. So there's a director portal. So the band director will jump in. They've got a handful of tasks they need to complete. So they upload a handful of pictures, a short video clip, an explainer of what they're looking to fundraise for. And that gives us enough content to go in and then create a donation page for them. So that lander has, it's customized to their school and their needs. And that's the payment gateway as well. And then after that donation page is ready to go and our marketing campaign is ready to go, the band director has students jump into the student portal and just add names and emails of potential donors. So grandma, aunt, Mr. Jones across the street, and we then market to their audience. And so we do an email campaign to them. It's a 2 or 3 week stint, and then the fundraiser ends. 3 days later, we cut them a check, and they've got the money they need now for the new school year.
Oh, that's cool. So you basically just do some automated email campaigns that direct them to making a donation.
Yes. Please don't add a lot of competitors from your. Yes. So the interesting thing is, the more I talk about this with people, I mean, the young, hungry, and scrappy folks are like, I should do that. So if there's an interest there, come talk to me. We'll see if there's something you can do at Fundraise Genius. But
yeah,
yes.
no, I mean, I think it's a really cool concept, and similar to ed tech, where it's such a specific niche that you're not going to have a ton of competition. But like, part of your moat is that you already understand the industry really well, and so you know what levers to go push on to drive interest and revenue and everything like that. So I think it's cool to see where your experience in sales has carried over to the businesses that you're now running. For example, at Clarity Management, where you're doing the land development, you were able to essentially bootstrap a lot of that and be very scrappy, similar to the way you were at Stukent. But with Fundraise Genius, you're able to take some of the like ed tech knowledge that you had, essentially like the Rolodex and everything, and build this other company, which is sweet.
We're really trying to cater to like niche markets. So Rexburg, Idaho, like there's only so many people that want something specific here, like the 1 acre lots, for example, or the riverfront lots we're doing now. With Fundraise Genius, I've had a lot of people say, well, why not sports programs or this or that? And it's like, we can do that at some future date, but like, I really want to stay niche in performing arts. It's like bands, choirs, orchestras. I want to help this demographic right now and be really successful and go deep there before we start to expand, similar to what Stukent did with digital marketing before they went marketing and then business.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, because then you don't have to worry about building out separate processes for different use cases. You already know that it works for this one. The only thing you need to do is push more on the top line, like how do I go get more music programs at more schools to just use us? And then if you want to expand, you have these existing customers that you can essentially increase your NRR through just adding in other sports programs and stuff like that.
Exactly.
But
yep.
Brandon, it's been awesome having you on. I guess just a question I have for you is if you had any advice for like a sales rep that's looking to buy or build a business, like what would you encourage them to consider?
Yeah. And I've heard you ask a few other folks on there, like if they had less than $1,000 to start a business, what would you go do?
That one too.
Yeah.
That's a good one.
Yeah. And honestly, like when I hear that, I'm like, if you only have $1,000, my initial thought is to like go and put your head back down and grind where you're at before you go figure out your next venture and save a little bit more money so you have that safety net and also a little more confidence going into what it is you're going to do next. Because I mean, my wife often has to remind me, it's like less stuff, more focus. Like don't add a ton of things to your plate. Just stay really focused on a few things. But if I were looking to do that, what I would probably go do is find a business owner nearing retirement, preferably in an industry that I know well or have interest in, and I'm willing to kind of roll up my sleeves and learn, and approach them with saying, hey, listen, like I'm young, I'm hungry, I've only got maybe $1,000 to my name, but I want to come in and help you grow your business and help you have an exit strategy for retirement. And now you have a successor. I'll be your successor. Like, teach me the business. Let me come in. Only pay me for the value that I bring, meaning like additional revenue that you drive for the business, and figure out some type of succession plan with them. And maybe you have to be a little more patient if it's like a 3 or 5 year runway. But there's a lot of people nearing retirement. Kids don't want to take over that business and they're not sure what they're going to do. And you might find a way to either have a seller finance deal or just an opportunity to come in and add a lot of value and then eventually run that business. That would be my preference over starting something from scratch.
No, I love that. That's an interesting take on how to acquire a business versus like trying to go and pull out a loan, just working with someone to figure out how can I drive value here and how can I help them make their exit. Which is, that's super sharp. But I appreciate your time, Brandon, and being on the podcast.